Luigi's clam house stood alone near the end of the boardwalk, a large and rotting wooden bulkhead protecting it from the water below. It was a curious, pitch roof house with ugly blue painted cedar shingles and window shutters meant to evoke the days when the city was little more than a fishing village. The strong stench of shellfish permeated the air around the restaurant, and fat seagulls sat on the nearby trash cans, stuffing their thick beaks into paper bags to fish out any uneaten food. Inside, the musty smell of wet wood and salt filled the dining room. Nautical junk decorated every wall, a hodgepodge of lobster traps, ship's wheels, and mounted fish. Luigi's Clam House was the kind of place tourists raved about and locals avoided. A portly man with a mustache and hollow eyes greeted Harmon at the door. When Harmon asked for Absalom Ray, the man puckered his lips. "Why would you want him?" the man asked. "I'm from the Beacon. I just want to ask him a couple of questions," Harmon said. "What are you, a reporter?" "I am. He an employee of yours?" The man looked equal parts annoyed and apprehensive. "Don't worry, it'll only take a few minutes." The man took a deep breath and his shoulders sagged. "I guess you can talk to him," he said, his unease barely assuaged. He directed Harmon to a back room off the kitchen, where a weathered old man sat in a dingy room peeling potatoes. His face, carved with a lifetime of wrinkles, was a testament to many questionable decisions. Gray streaks ran through his wild beard. He had gnarled hands that resembled tree stumps. He clutched at a paring knife. He wore a red knitted cap and a stained apron and groaned when he moved. "Are you Absalom Ray?" Harmon asked. The old man's joints popped as he peeled a potato. He looked up from his labor and nodded. I am. Who are you?" "Harmon Bass. I write for the Surfside City Beacon, and I'd like to talk to you about Larry Westermeyer." The elder lowered the knife at the mention of Westermeyer's name. "What do you want, Mr. Bass?" Absalom asked, his voice like a receding wave. "Before he died, Larry Westermeyer told me about certain things going on in this town. He said you might know the truth about a certain mayor." Absalom snorted and was about to protest when Harmon added, "and a certain old sea god." "Aye, Icthalagog." "That's right." Absalom shook his head. "You've come searching for answers from someone who's too tired and sick to care anymore, Mr. Bass. Larry's dead because he knew too much and started talking to the wrong people. I sure as shit don't want to be talking to any reporters. A friend of mine, Dee Wilton, was killed recently. Larry believes she was murdered by men who follow the mayor's orders." Absalom's kneecaps nearly buckled as he stood up. "What do you want? My condolences on your friend's death? Maybe you should leave now while you're still alive to care about your memories of her. You don't want to know how that poor lass met her end." Harmon reached for his notebook and pen. "So you do know how she was murdered?" "No. But know this, Mr. Bass. If you dig too deep, you will not like what you find. And you will never be able to escape it. I know all about Icthalagog. I was one of his loyal devotees long before Fisk even came to power and kicked me out." "Kicked you out?" "Aye, Mr. Bass. This city is little more than a cult now, run by a group of bloodthirsty pagans that care less about prosperity than they do their own benefit. The worshippers have always been here. They've been here long before the town, and I'm sure they'll be here long after the town is gone as well. It's how this city has attracted tourists, how our fishing remained bountiful, how we prosper more than any other seaside tourist town." "When you say cult," Absalom grunted. "Funny thing about these small seashore towns. They come off as pleasant resorts, all innocent-like, as if they've been that way all along. But underneath they are rotten places built on blood and sacrifice. Different blood, different sacrifices, but still blood and sacrifice." The more Absalom talked, the more Harmon wrote, until his shorthand warped into non-describable scribbles. They gathered, the men of this town along Azimuth Basin, from well-heeled families. They cloaked themselves under cowls and behind masks so no one would know who they are. It's been the truth for generations. The sons and fathers and their kin going back to the first miserable bastards to wind up shipwrecked here, Absalom told Harmon. I know about the sailors, the first inhabitants of the island, Harmon said. Pah! Absalom spat on the floor of the storage room. Harmon made a mental note to himself to never eat there again. All the old families are descended from those accursed men. It was my great-great-grandpappy who first came ashore from the shipwreck. He was the one of the first to communicate with the old god. My grandpappy and then my pappy instructed me on the rites, and I learned to pray to Icthalagog in the way that he wants. Not like what Fisk's family thinks. I was a worshipper of Icthalagog before Desmond was even born. I stood near the shack on Azimuth Basin during the high tide and called his name, and I made the promises of the deep for his favor. We all did, until Fisk. Harmon wasn't sure if Absalom was talking about Desmond or his father, but he didn't want to interrupt. For only he has seen millennia pass in the blink of an eye, is truly worthy of respect, and only those who have partaken of the fungi can perceive him. The fungi melt the barrier between worlds, those damnable mushrooms that us communicate with Icthalagog. He has seen the birth of this island from when the ones who were here before cast their fishing nets wide from the white sandy shores. The ones who were here before? You mean the natives, the Lenape? No, these weren't indigenous folks. They've been here since the very beginning when this island was young. Then what is Icthalagog? God? Absalom smiled. Icthalagog is real. His heart beats beneath the waves, his voice echoes on the furious squalls, his eyes glimpse through time at us on the land. It is he who keeps ill omen from this town, and in exchange we give him what he wants. Have you murdered anyone, Absalom? Harmon asked quietly. Not me, but I've seen it. What did you see? Tell me. Absalom shook his head and gave Harmon a sideways glance. He started peeling potatoes again. No, Absalom answered. I'm in no mood to wind up dead. Besides, it doesn't matter. Nothing will come of what you say. Fisk thinks that he's unstoppable because of Icthalagog's favor, but that's not the truth. He deviates from what Icthalagog wants, and if he demands too much, that will anger him. What happens then? Absalom hung his head. The same thing that always happens to small men who think themselves bigger than the old things of the world. Icthalagog don't care if you're a devoted servant or someone trying to destroy him. How could he? We're so small to him, and after a while that kind of idea just gets into your soul like dirt trapped underneath your fingernails. Sometimes you just need to tell someone about it, even though it won't help. I appreciate that. Absalom dropped the peeled potato into a bucket of water and then picked up another one. My pappy taught me the chants. They're like singing a hymn, but it's not to the Lord above, it's to the things below. The call of desperate souls, pledging fealty to a blasphemous God, something beyond reason or compassion. They promised blood, Absalom croaked. What do you mean, blood? I mean blood! The blood in your veins, the life force of every man, woman, and child. Blood. Icthalagog craves it. Last person we fed it was Eli. Harmon paused. Eli? Eli Waters, a local dock worker. Dragged him to the shack at the end of the pier, Absalom grimaced. Eli's got a gag in his mouth so as we could barely hear him screaming, but his face is red, so he's trying. I remember the terror in his eyes, the blind panic. He knows he's a dead man. They bring him in the shack, and a hooded one pulls out a filleting knife and slices Eli's arm. poor Eli bleeds into a hole in the cabin, and his blood trickles into the water. Absalom stopped and fished into his pocket for a small metal flask that looked as old as he was. He took a swig of what smelled like cheap whiskey. "Go on," Harmon urged. "Then we drink a concoction brewed from the fungi called the blood of Icthalagog. Ancient mushrooms the ones who were here before warned us about. They lived in these lands for ages past. They said that the fungi were from another place, beyond time. But still we all drank. Tastes like death, I tell you. Foul and pungent drink that rolls around on your tongue. The world melts away and you see these things, shapes, creatures that shouldn't exist." Harmon wrote feverishly. "What are these creatures?" "They're formless things, shambling, bulky, clumsy, fins and teeth and frog eyes, reeking of rot and death." "Then what?" "Then he came." "Icthalagog?" "Aye," Absalom said as he dropped the peeled potato into the bucket and picked up another. "That sounds pretty kooky. Maybe those mushrooms were playing tricks on you," Harmon suggested. "Listen, you soft office boy. I know what I seen. Men like you would die from fright if you witnessed him rising over Azimuth Basin. I can imagine Eli Waters being crushed in the deep, the air squeezed from his chest. The living blasphemy made me see the truth about the world. There was no God in heaven. If there was, why would that God allow such a foul entity to exist beneath our waters?" "You're saying there's a pact between the town fathers and a what? Giant squid?" "No! Haven't you been listening to me? Icthalagog ain't no squid. He's a god, ancient and tempestuous. I seen Icthalagog take Eli Waters while the others chanted. You get me now, office boy? Hear what I'm telling you? I ain't no madman. I'm the only sane one here. I know Icthalagog is as real as you and I." "Even if I were to believe you." "Believe me?" Absalom rasped. "The ocean is indifferent to what you think you know. It cares not a whit for your news, your paltry reportage. The ocean will claim all of us in the end. The real truth isn't on the stinking island, but beneath the waves in those quiet, dark places. I've seen what the ocean can do." Absalom took another swig of whiskey and dropped the potato into the pile. "When Icthalagog seizes you tightly in his salty embrace, he never lets go. The ocean hugs hard, its suffocating pressure plunging you fathoms below into the abysmal dark, into eternal night. That's where Eli Waters is, another soul joining the sailors and swimmers and misfortunate ones crushed by the ocean's mighty hug." Harmon didn't know what to make of the old man's story. The reporter had dealt with his share of cranks before, but never like this. Absalom, clearly disturbed, truly appeared to believe what he described. "I appreciate your time, Mr. Ray." Harmon slipped his notebook back into his jacket pocket. "Dee Dee Wilton was with child when she died." Absalom snorted, but Harmon continued. "Was that part of Icthalagog's plan?" Absalom shook his head and scratched his beard. "I don't know. It's not the place of ants to understand the whims of monsters. And that's what you and me are, Mr. Bass. Ants. Who knows what Fisk is trying to do? He's wrong, though." "How?" "He kicked out anyone who opposed his new vision of Icthalagog. Says that we should be the ones controlling the Ancient One. Pah! As if we can. That's not how Icthalagog works. You can't force the will of a living god. One day, Fisk is going to find out what happens when you try to take what belongs to Icthalagog."